Hello, everyone. A very good morning. Hope all of you are in the best of health and spirits. We are all set for yet another exciting conversation today. For our new audiences today who have been joining us, the We Talk series brings to you the most sought after voices from the industry and for the industry who share their valuable insights with us over brief conversations about what's going on in the HR ecosystem, what's new to come, and most importantly, what's keeping HR leaders on their toes. So today we have a special guest joining us. Please join me in welcoming her. She is Shalini Natraj, Head of HR Transformation and Delivery at Maersk. Welcome, Shalini.
Hi, Vasaki, and hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here to share my story and also learn in the same process.
A quick introduction about Shalini before we move on to our conversation. So, with over 20 plus years of experience in HRM across various multinational companies, her current responsibilities include delivering HR solutions for all stages of an employee's life cycle at Maersk. Her expertise in building a strong talent agenda to support the ever challenging business is highly valued within the organization. In addition, she is a staunch advocate for strong community relations, diversity, and inclusion at Maersk. She has been pivotal in leading programs that not only enhance an employee's professional career, but also their overall well being. With that, yet again, a very warm welcome, Shalini. It is indeed a pleasure of us to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So, Shalini, to start off with today's discussion and to set in the context, my first question for you would be, according to you and your industry demands, what type of skill shortage do you think is causing the recent talent war?
Great question. And Vasaki, I'll spend a minute on the industry and the company itself just to set some context, right? So Maersk is used to be a shipping company, an ocean carrier. And then a few years ago, we decided we wanted to be in the end-to-end logistics and supply chain space. And so we've had a transformation already from ocean to L&S. And now we're building logistics and supply chain on the foundation of technology. So that way, the transformation has been multifold, and hence our capability and talent landscape also has changed drastically in the last maybe 5 years. So when I think about your question in specific and the shortage we're seeing, it's actually in multiple places. When we think about India and the business, our biggest teams are actually in the global capability center, so the GIC space. We also have a huge technology team that's sitting out of India. And then we do our business in India, right? We have a sales team, logistics team, as well as the port. So our biggest capability shortage, if you will, has been in two spaces. One is technology itself, because we aren't a technology company, but we are competing with technology giants and e-commerce giants. So then all things to do with end-to-end technology is something that we are trying to hire and seeing a shortage, obviously. And then we're also seeing a lot of capability gaps in logistics and supply chain. I don't think India as a talent has gone into that from an education perspective, and hence there are fewer and fewer experts coming out. It's getting better now, but we still need to look at more logistics and supply chain talent coming out. And finally, and this is my most important topic, is women at sea. We hire a lot of seafarers from India. Almost every single one of them is a man. And we haven't been able to attract more women from India to be at different ranks in the journey, also because I don't think parents in India and women in India think that this is the kind of profession they want to get into. And what we want to do at Maersk is create more opportunities for women to study shipping and then provide them a career to get into shipping longer term. So technology, L&S, and women in shipping are the three places where we need more talent, and we're also seeing equal amount of shortage in it.
Thank you for setting the context, Shalini. Some pertinent point you have mentioned at the very beginning only. So, as you have mentioned that over the last 5 to 8 years, how the complete transformation has happened. Mm-hmm. So that kind of leads me to my next question. So, talking about employers' branding strategy, can you shed some light on your employers' branding strategy and how it has evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, and it's such an interesting place to be in, because we went through so much transformation internally. We also needed to change our positioning in the market as we continued that, right? Because when you think about Maersk, we've heard every single person who knows Maersk know the container, knows the Blue Star, knows the vessel. So the association with Maersk has a lot of ocean connection to it. But we're not only ocean carriers anymore. So then, the biggest thing I would say is our pivot from an ocean to a technology-based organization was the biggest thing that we needed to change, which means our storytelling behind it, which means how we brand ourselves also needed to go through a change. So Baisakhi, what we've done as a part of employment brand is we started slightly more traditional. We were shy from a media perspective, so we didn't share too much stories. That's where we started about 10 years ago. And we've slowly looked at, we go where the talent is and not so much the other way around, which means we identify pockets of places, could be like anything maritime colleges where we can hire seafarers from, that's where we go. And then we go into tech places where we go, all kinds of LinkedIn and all the portals and tools that everybody else uses, but also slightly more niche. So we go into conferences, we go into places where we think logistics is discussed as a conversation, and then we kind of brand there. The last thing which I'm really passionate about is we have lots of events that we've done, which brings in focus into who we are. And that's also connected to diversity, because we believe a lot in the industry itself is considered, and I hate this term, but considered male oriented because of, big vessels and cranes and very, if you think about it, more black and white. And we want to hire more women because it is, and I've been here 5 years and I've been super happy about the decisions I've made. So then how do we attract more women into it? So our employment brand strategy, one, started with identifying who we are and having a story behind it, and then creating a global identity on who we are and how we present it globally, and then customize it to India, and then customize it to LNS, customize it to tech, customize it to diversity, and then share the story on Insta, LinkedIn, but also in specific campuses and wherever else that we go. I'll stop here, but I can share more details as we go along.
We'd love to hear that. In fact, very well mentioned. So Shalini, you have already mentioned how, though, how much we do not want to say, but it is considered to be a very male-centric vertical, and how Maersk is already taking an action towards, hiring more women at sea. But when we talk about diversity, you'll also agree that it's more than the gender equality at work. So can you please throw some more light on your DE&I agenda as to how, as an organization, you're working towards it?
Yeah. So diversity, I think that's an amazing question and super close to my heart, but also super close to the heart and soul of Maersk itself. And I might have mentioned this before, but also that there is a perception and a reputation of Maersk being a little bit more male-oriented. And it was before. When you think about seafarers and things like that, the kind of work we did was slightly more male-friendly, if you will. But since then, we've actually looked at two things. One, the work that we do has changed, obviously, but also the kind of talent that we need to bring in the balance within our organization has also changed. So our strategy has changed completely, going into a balance and merit-based versus gender-based. Right. So that's the first thing. So we've changed our internal culture, we've changed policies, we've changed how we look at talent from being gender-based versus being capability-based. So that's the first part of it, right? Changing the whole thing. And I honestly believe that while we do a lot of very specific hiring, you go into women colleges, go into doing drives that attracts women, it's also important that we have an ecosystem within the company that makes women more successful. It's not just about hiring, but also about ensuring that we are welcoming the difference versus trying to make them similar to everybody else who's at Maersk. So we're working a lot on how do we create an ecosystem internally, how do we develop, how do we look at their differences and make that better and celebrate it every day, right? That's the second part of what we do. We attract women, we then make our processes, policies, culture very, very supportive of their growth. And then we ensure that there is a constant development and focus on them. So that's on the gender and women. And we do this globally. And there are lots of training programs, lots of mentorship and everything that we do to support women as they come in. But there are many things that we do also for creating allyship, right? We need men to be able to create a welcoming opportunity for women, support them when something is needed, and then create a well-balanced environment. So that's on gender. We do a lot on LGBTQIA plus community also. We hire a lot of them, but also it's important that as we hire that we make them successful. So in India, it hasn't been for too long because legally we couldn't do that too much. But in the last few years, we've focused a lot on attracting them, ensuring that they can help us create a culture and co-create that culture with them. And then how do we ensure that we can integrate them and celebrate the differences that they bring in? And one interesting anecdote I can share here, you must have seen the Maersk containers, right? Like really big containers. So we actually took a few containers and painted it in rainbow colors. And that container actually travels the world, goes into every single of our offices. It was in India a few months ago, in Bangalore, in many of our offices. And we actually celebrate that. We bring in we bring in the families. We talk openly about how we've succeeded as an organization, as a business, by bringing in people who are different from people we've hired before, and then also made them successful. So the last thing I'd say, Vaisakhi, to your question is, it's not so much about being and talking about policies, but more about, are we creating a positioning for people who are different from who we hired before? Could be gender, could be sexual orientation. Do they feel like we are the right company to join? Do they feel like we're the right company to stay and develop themselves? And are we giving them the development and the career that they deserve? I'll stop here, but that's what we're doing.
Beautifully put together. It's amazing to hear, especially the container part that you have mentioned. It's amazing to hear how Maersk is actually strategizing to bring into places, rather walking the talk.
Yes.
Shalini, my next question would be the vertical that you work in, like seafarer. So it's kind of very difficult to even understand as to how the pandemic has overall disrupted the entire settlement. And nowadays we talk so much about remote and hybrid work setup. So I'm kind of curious to know that how are your employee engagement strategies, especially when we discuss remote and hybrid work setup, how is that working?
Yeah, and it's great, Vaisakhi, that you started with seafarers, because I'll also tell you, when the pandemic started and we started looking at hybrid working, we were so happy with everything we did, all 100% of our employees working from home and la. And then suddenly you have hundreds and thousands of seafarers stuck in the middle of the ocean because no ports wanted to welcome them. And for weeks together, they were stuck there. And there's nothing like working from home, right? You can't operate cranes from home. So there is a big population that works with Maersk who doesn't have the ability and the opportunity to work from home. So let me take a step back and talk about flexibility. And this is not so much about working from home, but this is about providing the flexibility that everybody needs based on the jobs that they do. So what we did with the seafarers was more specifically, okay, once you're arrived home, then we give them a longer break. So that way they have that flexibility, right? We give them all the support that they need to be connected to their family and things like that as they need. So the flexibility and the options for hybrid or flexibility has changed based on who you are and where you work. But if I make it a little bit real for office, then a few things that we've done more specifically with employee engagement in the hybrid environment is, one, truly understand that what we did before is not going to be enough as we go into this environment, right? And I used to be the kind of leader who liked having my team with me. We would have lunches, and my ability as a good engaging leader came from face-to-face interactions. And then I was cooped up in the house for a year with all my teams remote. They'd all gone back to their native and stuff like that. And then suddenly my leadership was questioned. And that's where we started at Maersk. We then spoke to all the leaders and realized what was the importance of actually treating our teams differently than you did before and trying to understand exactly what engagement meant to them. We've had some funny stories. There were women who were now cooped up with their mother-in-laws at home. And the boss would call them every few hours to say, hey, how are you doing? And then the mother-in-law was like, why is your boss calling me so many times, right? So it's a little bit that we needed to figure out what works for the employee and then figure out how can we engage them in the environment they're in. So we met them where they are. That was the first thing we did. We trained the leaders, we spoke about empathy differently, and then we ensured that they were able to do that on a regular basis. But in this environment, the leaders also felt very lonely. So we did a lot of things to support our leaders themselves to stay positive, to help them, and then to give time off as what was needed, right? So the employee engagement strategy starts with not what the company wants to do for you, but what you need for your engagement, and then trying to cater to that. That was the big element that we worked on. I can give you some examples that we did. I look at the engagement strategy as hire to retire. So we start engagement from the day you get hired to until the day you retire. I want to continue to engage you. So every single life cycle that you have as an employee, we identify moments that matter, and then we try and engage. I'll give you an example. I believe that as soon as you hire, if you don't have a strong onboarding process, then your engagement already dips day 2, day 4. And your network outside of the organization is so strong that you could actually leave. And organizations tell you that the highest attrition they have is in the first 1 to 3 months because of the same reason. So we start with engagement with onboarding. And then we start going into consciously talking about what does development mean to you? What does recognition mean to you? And then we'll have about 50%, 60% similar things that everybody goes through. And then the rest of it gets customized to who you are, what you're doing, which region you're in, and what is important to you. Right. So, and then you go into career opportunities, developmental opportunities that are connected to your engagement. And a lot of well-being, like I believe it's not the employee who's doing the work today, but it's the whole self that needs to matter. So we're doing a lot of things with well-being and engagement connected to it. And then the last thing we'll say, just this is something I'm super passionate about, Ukraine and Russia. And we were doing business in both those places. And teams across the world came together to, one, support Ukraine employees as they were going through it, and then support Russian employees too. And then we created more engagement with them, but also with everybody else who came together to do something that's bigger than them for the community, as well as the support system that we could build. So last thing I would say is, as anybody thinks about employee engagement, it shouldn't be individual activities, but the whole life cycle, and then create a red thread across to ensure that you can engage.
Beautiful. I believe what I can figure out from your conversation is like each and every incident that took place in the past 2 years, it kind of gave you more learning opportunities. Yes. And more of a transformation as to how bigger and better the organization can get with time. That's an amazing takeaway. Amazing. So Shalini, this brings me to my last question. 20 years in this industry and nearly half a decade as a woman in seafarer, I would call you. So can you share some of the most prominent challenges that you have faced in the talent acquisition space? And most importantly, what were your strategies to overcome them?
Let me start with how I started, right? I'm typically, it didn't have too much of a vision, didn't think that I needed to be the head of HR someday. It was more about the passion that I had for understanding people, right? And understanding the mind. So I studied psychology. I thought this was a great place to be in. And then since then, I've become a coach. It also is because I believe human beings have so much more than what you see in an 8-hour work engagement. So then if we can uncover that whole person, then the benefit for themselves, the manager, as well as the company is huge. So my passion with people started there. And then since then, I've had my entire career in HR going into human mind and then ensuring that the best comes out of them. And then the best also lands to the company making profit out of it, right? So that's been the journey. So some of the challenges that I might have faced also is a little bit about this perception that you're in a male-dominated organization, or sometimes I've been in board meetings as a board member being the only woman in that room. And while there is a perception that women are treated differently, it also starts with me. If I think I'm being treated differently, then that shows up wherever I go and however I perform. And that becomes more conscious for everybody else. So I always enter a room, not because of my gender, but because I believe I deserve to be there. There are times when it hasn't worked, but most times it has. So I think a lot of it is also 50% attitude from our end, and then 50% of how the other thing reacts with you. So that's what my story has been. So then I define who I want to be. I define how I want to be seen. And then I love the organization or the other person meet me in the middle to make it a successful relationship. So some of the challenges our industry is facing, I really think as we go into some of the prominent challenges right now, we're saying it is the talent pools itself. So because we've gone through so much transition within the market itself, and then my organization, we are looking at various different types of talent coming in. And then are we able to attract them and create the right branding? But also, are we able to make them successful? That is a big challenge. So it isn't a one size fits all. It isn't I make one policy and everything happens, right? Now we have to customize it so much to every team, every region we're in, and every kind of location we're hiring for. So then it becomes a fairly important challenge for us to look at. And then we're also working on a lot of geographical challenges, if you will. Even within India, the kind of talent I hire in Bangalore, which is very, very tech-centric and HR. But when I go to Mumbai or Chennai, then I'm hiring a lot of operational excellence. I'm hiring leaders for managing big teams. In Mumbai, I'm hiring logistics people, then I'm hiring seafarers. So the customization that's required for every strategy that I build is going to be really, really important, right? So some of the biggest challenges that I would say is identifying the right need in our company, identifying the right talent pool that will satisfy that need, and then having the right strategies to bring them in and make them successful. Like that's the big part of it. And in this, then how do we make women more successful? How do we attract LGBT teams and things like that? That is something that we are working through.
Great hearing, and I simply love the part when you just ushered in so much positivity and inspiration for all the women out there. It was an amazing takeaway that believing in yourself is the first step in creating a difference.
Yeah.
So with that, we come to the end of today's conversation. Thank you so much, Shalini, for sharing this amazing insight. It was really an absolute delight for me to converse with you today. For our audiences, thank you once again. We'll be back with yet another exciting conversation next week. Till then, stay safe, everyone, and have a lovely week ahead.